What's up, guys? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the overall markets. I'm going to break down some big headlines coming out involving Tesla stock and what you should be watching for as time goes on. Just to know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $2,000, you're guaranteed 25 in total. And deposit $5,000, you're guaranteed 60 free stocks. The offer ends very soon at the end of July, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, let's talk about what's happening with Tesla stock. Tesla's down 3.55% for the day. It's also selling off in the after hours as we got lots of bad news for the day. Now, I mentioned to you all I was expecting Tesla to dip a bit, but I wanted to see Tesla hold 340 to get that bounce to make a higher low compared to 333. But instead, we ended up losing that, and that would be the more bearish case we were talking about for a temporary decline. Now, I understand that Tesla has a lot of potential to bounce approaching the robotaxi event, the big launch of the robotaxi in Austin, Texas, but we're not ready yet for that big bounce, and we're getting another buying opportunity as Tesla continues to fall. And I do think there's a risk of more downside looking at the setups. So why is Tesla so weak? What on earth is going on? Well, the market did come down for the most part. Most stocks did see a small dip today as a result of our important ISM services data. But Tesla also has lots of bad headlines coming out. Number one, there's been all this talk about how the German sales are down 36.2% for the month of May for Tesla, as they only sold about 1,200 units. That's despite the fact that the new EV registrations are up 44.9% in Germany. So only Tesla sales are down, and the overall EV market still grew in Germany. So that's not the best of signs for Tesla, as we're still seeing a lot of political scrutiny that's affecting Tesla's overall sales. On top of this, the Chinese made EV sales are kind of flat in May compared to what we saw in April, but compared to the previous years, they're still down. So that's not the best of news as well. Tesla basically shipped about 61,662 Model 3 and Model Y models, right? In the Shanghai plant, that's still down about 15% relative to the same period last year. So not the best of news as the Chinese made sales are kind of like down. Not the best of news. That's also getting some negative headlines. And then finally, there's been a lot of talk about how there's no sign of improvement in May for their sales. They're getting lots of scrutiny for this, and we're continuing to see lots of negative headlines. Keep that in mind, guys. Despite this, Wedbush is saying Tesla should still outperform the markets with their big launch of the robotaxi, but the price price ratio is dipping because Tesla is starting to show some weakness just for now. And then when it comes to seasonality, Thursdays tend to be green only about 47% of the time historically for Tesla, and we tend to see more volatility from the 2 o'clock and 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time periods. June is historically a very strong month for us, and I do think there's going to be a big bounce coming, but we're not ready yet. We have to be very patient with this. Another reason why Tesla in the market fell is because we had the ISM services data. This data was weak. ISM services PMI was weak, below expectations. Business activity was weak. New orders were low and prices were high, showing signs of an inflationary risk. Not the best of data, in my opinion. Tomorrow we just have initial jobless claims and some bill auctions, and that's pretty much it. Nothing too crazy comes out for tomorrow. It's going to be very, very quiet data. So keep that in mind. This is all we're seeing on the economic calendar. Another reason why Tesla may have sold off is because President Trump has imposed 50% tariffs on steel and aluminum. They go into effect today. So he signed the executive order yesterday, and now the tariffs go into effect today. This is going to be affecting a lot of companies that have lots of steel imports, such as like Tesla. And then simultaneously, you also have to remember that it's going to be affecting other countries. Canada, for example, exports 90% of their steel and aluminum to the US, so this will be a little negative for them. That's why they're scrambling to form a deal right now. So I think all this news is bad for Tesla. The new tariffs that came out on steel and aluminum, the news about the ISM services data being weak, and all this news about Tesla sales in China being weak year over year, and the German sales being weak. All this bad news is causing Tesla to dip, and it caused us to end up losing our support, which is not really scary to me. I just see this as an opportunity, guys. Another buying opportunity is coming, and I'm still excited about how this is going to pan out. So when it comes to seeing this as a buying opportunity, that does not mean you should just FOMO everything into Tesla and go crazy. That doesn't make any sense. The intelligent thing would be to just dollar cost average and be very, very patient with the buys. And also keep in mind, there's going to be a risk of more downside going into tomorrow when we look at the current setup, because Tesla is still showing weakness. So I want to be very, very straightforward about that, right? We might see some downside, and I don't think Tesla's done yet. But even if we see the downside, there could still be a monstrous bounce as we approach the next, couple of weeks. So I'm going to break down exactly why that is, at least from this point on. So looking back at Tesla, the good news is that, even though we have this sell off, there is still potential for a much larger bounce. When you look at the 4 hour time frame, just like this, okay, I know it's a little hard to see, but we could actually go as low as like 320, or even as low as like 311. We could drop as low as 311 to 320 and still see a monstrous bounce on Tesla for an inverse head and shoulders setup, right? We could still see a very, very big bounce even if we dump another 10 points on Tesla. That's for the much longer term when it comes to, the launch of the robo taxi, or because of the current setup. Now, we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. We're not running to $350 or $400 yet. We still look bearish, so we have to play the chart as it is. Our EMAs look bearish. We're trending downwards in terms of them. And then if you look at our 30 minutes time frame, we had a big rejection off of head and shoulders here. We're just continuing to decline right now. So there's going to be a risk of more downside as time goes on. There's this support at 327. We got to hold that. If it doesn't hold, we're looking for essentially 325, and eventually all the way down towards, the much lower levels like 320 are going to be coming as we continue to decline. And I do think there's going to be a risk of more downside for Tesla. I also believe that Wall Street are going to be buying this dip. They're looking at this as an opportunity. So the reason they're also dipping Teslas to buy this thing up, because they're getting ready for a very, very big move. Looking at Tesla, we're making lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, lower lows. Unless we get back above like 337, if we break 337, we could be looking for the 340s again. But if we can't hold above 337, we're favoring 325 and 320 as our most likely targets. We're looking kind of weak here. There's an imbalance down here at 322. So I do think the odds do favor Tesla coming down to like 325 to 320 for a little bit more downside, at least for the time being. It's not just because of Tesla. The overall market also has a risk of some downside just temporarily before we get a much larger, monstrous bounce. I'm going to break down exactly why that is. So what's happened to Tesla? We're kind of weak right now on the 4 hour time frame, and I see a risk of us potentially coming lower. But it's not just Tesla that's doing this. The whole market could follow that trend. But even if we do dip, like I said before, the whole market could bounce later. I'll talk about that in just a couple of seconds. So another issue with Tesla is that when you look at the daily time frame, there's this support right here, right at this 331 area. We need to hold this area, and so far we're starting to lose this during the after hours, which is a big sign of weakness. So, unless we hold this support to balance, we could be dipping back down to like 325, if not down towards 320. So watch your levels just to be very, very safe. There's going to be a risk of some downside looking at the daily time frame. The daily also has a negative PPO, and we're still looking weak. So I do still see that risk of downside. So be very, very careful on Tesla as time goes on. The weekly, however, although it may show signs of a slight decline, this is still very, very bullish in terms of the overall trend, right? We still have this cup and handle. Could we get a temporary dip towards like 325 or 320? Yeah, we could. We could be dipping lower. Even if they want to fill this gap, that's okay, because I see this as another buying opportunity. And I know Tesla will likely see a big bounce as we get closer to the robotaxi launch. Okay, so for now, yes, we could dip more, but I'm still optimistic. Now, when it comes to SPY, I want to talk about something very important that's going on. And this relates to Tesla because we are seeing the market moving very similarly. SPY actually closed in the red, and this is the first time we closed red like this in a while. So the way SPY is going, it's like this. Let me actually pull up the 4 hour time frame to show you this. So SPY is showing weakness. Now, there's two possibilities. I think that the chart is very bullish overall, but here's what's going to happen. Number one, this might be forming a cup and handle, right? If you want to be bullish, you need to see us hold above 598. If we break that, we could be going for 602 or above. We could be looking for the 600s if we break 598. But if we don't break 598, if we lose 595, we could still be very, very bullish, right? But we might get a temporary dip to 590, 588, wherever we end up going before we get that big leg up, right? You could take a trend line and kind of draw it out as our support, forming a potential bullish wedge. It all depends on how this ends up panning out. So what's going to happen is this, okay? When I zoom in like this, SPY is in a range right now. We like to reject off 598. In fact, the last time we hit 598 here, we got this big rejection. 598 is very, very tough. So we need to break 598s to start breaking out higher. If we lose 595, we're looking for a dip down to 592, then eventually back down towards these lower levels. And we'll see if we bounce there. My prediction is that we might see SPY trade sideways like this. Um, we might trade a little sideways between 598 and 595 for some time, but there's going to be a risk of us dipping towards 592 to 590 if we see the bearish divergence pan out. And even if we do dip a little bit, I still think we could be looking for a very, very monstrous bounce once we get that move down. So why do I think that the market may trade sideways and then possibly get a dip? Because we also have this bearish divergence that's starting to develop here on our MACD. And this is the first time this has happened in a while. We're now getting a bearish divergence, which typically favors downside. So I think that if we're about to reject, we could be looking for a bigger move down. It's possible, and this is what I'm predicting, that we might just trade sideways first before we end up continuing to fall. And there's going to be a risk of like 592 to 590, but then this could be followed by a big bounce. Now, the thing about this dip is that it depends on the levels. So you want to watch for confirmation. If we could break and hold 598, I could turn more bullish and change my view. If we lose 595, there's going to be a risk of more downside. And as of right now, we favor consolidation in a dip, looking at the current setup. So please keep that in mind. Same thing with the triple Q. So with the QQQ, it's the same thing. Same thing, guys. So when you look at this, let me zoom out a little bit more. Hopefully this is very clear and very simple. There's a cup and handle. Break 530, we could be pushing higher. If we can't break that, we're looking for a dip back down towards this trend line, taking us down to like 522 or so, and we'll see if we break or not. As of right now, we are consolidating, so we're just kind of stuck in the middle for the time being. And there's not really a whole lot that's going on, at least right now. So I want to see us basically break resistance and break past 530 to push higher. If we can't do that, we're going to likely consolidate between 530 and 527.5. And then if that fails us, we're looking for this, move down to like 523, and we'll see if we bounce there. I anticipate that we might trade sideways before we start to see a bit of a dip all the way back down to 523, and we'll see if we bounce or not off of that. That's the most likely possibility. Unless we hold above like 530 to change my mind, that's what I'm favoring. When you look at the IWM Russell 2000, we're seeing the same thing going on. We could be dipping to retest these these 206 to 207 zones, these EMAs. If we hit them and bounce, we could be looking for a rebound. If we lose them, we could be dipping a bit more before we try to bounce. But I do see a risk of us returning to at least 205 actually. On ES, it's very bullish looking, but it's very simple, right? Cup and handle. When I say it's bullish, the setup is still bullish. Even if we come down, we could still break out higher. That's what I mean by it's still bullish, right? So what's happening to this? If we could hold above 6,000, we could try to get back up above this resistance and push higher, but I don't really favor that. I think that we might trade sideways between 6,000 and 5,950. And then if that doesn't hold, we could be dipping a bit more to the lower 5,900s. And we'll see if we bounce off that to push higher as we have this nice looking cup and handle like structure. So we'll see if that ends up being the case or not. For NQ, we have the same thing going on. There's a nice like cup and handle. Now we need to break this resistance. You guys see that resistance right up here? We have this 21,800 area as our resistance. If that breaks, we could be pushing higher back up towards 22,000. If this doesn't break, we could be turning back down to 21,600 or below. That could also take us down towards these supports. So I anticipate that we're going to be trading sideways between 21,800 and 21,600 for some time, but there's going to be a risk of us turning lower before we see some kind of like rebound move. That's what I think is the most likely possibility. We could still be very bullish despite that potential dip that's coming. Bitcoin's a little bit weak right here. We're going to see if this blue trend line holds. So see the blue trend line down here, that's going to be acting as like a support. If it doesn't hold, we could see a risk of us dipping towards like 103,000, but then we could always bounce later on after that. So be careful, guys. Looking at Tesla, like I said before, we're still pretty weak. We might be retesting 325, and we'll see if we bounce. It also depends on the news that comes out tomorrow, but so far that's what the chart is suggesting. Now, with Nvda, it's very complicated, or not really complicated. Actually, it's simple and complicated at the same time. If we break 144, I could be looking for 148 plus. If we can't break that, there's going to be a retest of like 139 to 140. If that does not hold, we're looking for a dip to 135. But we could still bounce even if that happens. So, like I said before, I think that Nvidia is trying to uptrend very, very nicely, ride this trend line up. But what could happen is that we might hit 144, and I don't know if we're going to break this. If we break this, I could turn more bullish. If we don't break this, we might consolidate and start dipping to the trend line, but then we could bounce off this and continue to go higher just like this to respect this uptrend. This is also part of the breakout we're getting from this flag, so it's still technically on an uptrend. There could be a small dip coming in case that in case that it fails to break 144. For Apple, we're making a lower high and rejecting, so it's not looking as good. It needs to clear 207 to be really bullish. This might retest 200. We have to see if that holds to bounce. If not, we could be dipping lower towards like 198, and we'll see if buyers defend. So I think that we might be retesting 200, then 198. So keep that in mind. For Netflix, we're looking bullish. We need to see if we could hold 1,230. If not, we could be tipping more. I think that as of right now, as long as we're above support, we're favoring 1250 as a potential target. We look bullish. MicroStrategy looks bullish, excuse me. But the problem is that this might dip a little bit back down to about 368 or so before it tries to bounce like this. Overall, I'm still more bullish on this, even though we may get a temporary pullback. Celsius may be dipping a little bit more back down to like 39. We'll see if we bounce. We need to hold above this 40 area. If not, 39 flats could be tested. There's a slight bearish divergence, so it does favor that it might come down first before it tries to break out, but it's still a bullish setup. Supermicro has a nice double bottom, but the problem is we have a tough resistance over here. So double bottom is bullish, but then are we going to come down to our EMAs? Can we break 44 to push higher? Or do we lose that and come back down to like 41.5 before it bounces? I'm eyeing a move like this, and we'll see if that ends up being the case. Palantir got a rejection today, so it needs to hold 129.5. If it doesn't, we might be retesting 126 or below, but then we could still bounce after that. Rivian is on a bit of a downtrend. We need to get back above 14.5 to rebound. If not, we're looking for 13.8 or below. Back down to the low 13s, and we'll see if buyers defend. SoFi is on an uptrend. We need to see if we could hold above 13.2. If not, we could be dipping more. We might test 13.2 to 13, and we'll see if we bounce off that. AMD is on a nice uptrend, nice double bottom here, so it could be breaking out higher. We have to see if this 18 area holds. If not, we could be dipping and bouncing. If 18 does not hold, we could be dipping to like 113 and then we could bounce, but it's still bullish overall. ARM needs to hold above 128.9. As long as that holds, we're looking for a temp for 132. PayPal is trying to push, but the problem is that we got 1, 2, 3 rejections off 73. So we like to basically reject near 73, bounce, reject, bounce, reject, bounce, right? So we might be testing 73. If we break this, we could remain bullish. If we don't break this, we could return to 71 or so and then bounce again. That's all PayPal is doing for now. Coinbase has an inverse head and shoulders. There's a left shoulder, head, right shoulder. If we lose 252, we're looking for a bigger dip. And if we hold that, we could be bouncing. Hopefully, we dip a little bit more and bounce off 252 for the inverse head and shoulder setup. Amazon's looking a bit more bullish, looking at the setup as well. We're doing a good job at holding up. I want to see us hold 205 to continue to push for basically 210. Meta's looking bullish. If we break 690, we're looking for 700 as our target. It depends if we could hold above 690. If we don't, we could retest like this level right here, 675, then bounce. But it still looks bullish. Google needs to hold above 169 and then start pushing back up to like 172. Could try to bounce here. Microsoft is on a very, very bullish trend as long as we don't lose 461. We're favoring 465 and then 468. Finally, DJT is trying to rebound right here. We're going to see if this could get back above 22.8. The VIX is dipping. We're going to see if we could hold support and bounce back up about above 18.38. The 10 years flat, and so is the dollar. So we'll just have to see how this goes. The dollar's at support around 98.5. So we'll see if we bounce. That could also cause a lot of volatility. So with that being said, the market's looking a little bit weaker. If we get a temporary dip, it all depends on what happens with our data and the tariff news. Tesla may dip a bit more, so see this as an opportunity and be very, very careful. We could be retesting 325 tomorrow. The whole market may also come down, but we may consolidate for some time between 595 and 598 on SPY. But if we lose 595, we're looking for a bigger dip. However, it's not a big crash. It's just a temporary small dip that could be coming. And it's just going to be very, very short-lived. And I do think the market's going to bounce very nicely after that once it's done. So I thank you for listening. Please enjoy the rest of your guys' days, nights, or evenings. And I'll see you guys tomorrow before market open. As far as Tesla's going, see this as another opportunity. Could we dip more? Sure. But I'm going to be, once again, looking for a good opportunity to start loading up on positions as this thing starts to dip more. There's still a lot of potential for Tesla to run once we get closer to the robotaxi launch. But for now, we are dipping, so be ready to just read the price action, follow the trend, and get ready for some downside before we get that much larger bounce. Anyways, that's it for this one. Thank you all so much for listening. I'll see you guys tomorrow before the market opens. I just wish you all the best as always. So please take care and peace out.